My name is David. After a long day at work, all I wanted was to relax, maybe kick back with a beer in front of the TV. But as soon as I stepped through the front door, my plan for a quiet evening went out the window. The house was filled with the sound of animated voices. My wife and her best friend were in the living room, their chatter carrying through the hall like they were in the middle of a heated debate. The instant the door clicked shut behind me, their lively conversation came to an abrupt halt, replaced by hurried whispers. It felt off, like they'd been caught doing something they didn't want me to know about. Curious and slightly suspicious, I walked into the living room. They exchanged a quick glance, one of those "we've been caught" looks that only added to my unease. "What were you two talking about?" I asked, keeping my tone calm but firm as I looked between them. My wife laughed nervously and waved her hand like it was no big deal. "Oh, nothing. We just realized we were being too loud." The explanation felt flimsy. "That's not an answer," I replied, folding my arms and narrowing my eyes. Her friend avoided eye contact altogether, suddenly engrossed in her phone like it held the secrets of the universe. My wife, on the other hand, gave me a tight-lipped smile. "I'll tell you about it when the time is right," she said. That vague response only made me more suspicious. I wasn't a fan of being left in the dark, but I knew better than to press the issue in front of company. Picking a fight now wouldn't do any good. So, I let it go for the moment. Later, after her friend had left, I wasn't about to let the matter drop. As soon as the front door clicked shut behind her, I turned to my wife, crossing my arms. "All right, what's going on? What are you hiding?" I asked, my tone sharper this time. She let out a deep sigh and ran her hand through her hair. "It's nothing bad," she said. "Just a big problem I need help with. My friend and I were talking it through." "What kind of problem?" I pressed. She shook her head. "I'll tell you everything once it's resolved. For now, I just need your help tomorrow. I need you to drive me somewhere and pick me up later." Her refusal to explain further grated on me. "Why not just tell me now?" I demanded. "If it's so serious, don't you think I have a right to know?" She met my gaze, her expression resolute. "You're not going to get it out of me tonight," she said firmly. "But trust me, everything will be fine." Her words did little to reassure me. I hated being kept in the dark, but I could tell pushing her further wouldn't get me anywhere. So, with a reluctant sigh, I decided to drop it, for now. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with unanswered questions. What kind of problem could she possibly have that she couldn't tell me about? And why did her friend need to be involved? None of it added up, and a nagging feeling in my gut told me something wasn't right. Still, I told myself I'd find out soon enough. For now, I just had to wait. The next morning, I woke to my wife shaking my shoulder, her voice urgent. "Come on, we need to go," she said. Groggy and confused, I sat up. "Go where?" I asked, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. But she didn't answer. She was already moving around the room, her hurried movements making it clear that, whatever this was, it was important, to her, at least. Then I noticed what she was wearing, a fitted top and a short skirt, something she hadn't worn in years, and definitely not something I expected this early in the morning. "Why are you dressed like that?" I asked, frowning. She paused just long enough to glance at me. "Trust me. It's important," she said before hurrying out the door. That wasn't an answer, but she didn't give me time to press. Grumbling under my breath, I got dressed and followed her out to the car. She handed me a piece of paper with an address scribbled on it. I started the engine and drove, still trying to wrap my head around what was going on. The drive wasn't long, but my patience was wearing thin by the time we arrived. My eyebrows shot up as I parked outside a fancy restaurant, the kind of place we only went to on anniversaries or special occasions. "What's this?" I asked, confused. Before I could get an answer, she was out of the car and walking toward the entrance. Her friend, equally dressed up, was waiting for her. The two of them went inside together, leaving me in the car, baffled. I wasn't about to let this go. Something about the situation felt wrong. So, I parked the car and followed them inside, keeping a low profile. I found a spot near the window and ordered a drink, just enough to keep the staff from questioning me. From my seat, I had a clear view of their table. My wife and her friend were sitting with two men in suits. One of the men held her friend's hand, while the other was deep in conversation with my wife. At first, the atmosphere at their table seemed serious, but soon, they were laughing like old friends. My gut twisted. I discreetly pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos. Whatever was going on, it wasn't just a casual meeting. I stayed long enough to confirm my suspicions before heading back to the car. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what I'd just seen. None of it made sense, but one thing was clear. I was going to get answers. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was my wife, asking me to pick her up. When she got in the car, she looked almost excited. "You're going to be shocked when I tell you everything," she said with a smile. I kept my expression neutral. "Yeah, you'll tell me," I replied. As we drove home, my patience was hanging by a thread. I knew tonight was going to bring a serious conversation, whether she was ready for it or not. The anticipation of what my wife called the big day gnawed at me, and every attempt to get more details out of her or her friend hit a brick wall. All in due time, they'd say, almost in unison, like they were reading from the same script. "If too many people know, it could all fall apart," her friend added once, as if that explained anything. The whole thing was maddening. They acted like I was the only one not in on some grand secret. Whenever I pressed my wife, she just gave me a reassuring smile and said, "It's all above board. Don't worry." When the day finally arrived, my wife spent the morning meticulously getting ready. She chose an outfit that turned heads, a sleek blouse and a mini skirt. Meanwhile, I kept things simple with a crisp shirt and pants, though the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being dragged into something bigger than I realized. The unease only grew when we arrived at her friend's countryside house. The driveway was packed with luxury cars, the kind you'd expect at a high-profile gala, not a casual gathering. As we stepped inside, I was struck by how much the place resembled an upscale party. There were decorations, drinks, and soft music playing in the background. It didn't feel professional at all. Before I could make sense of it, the two men from the restaurant approached my wife. They greeted her warmly, showering her with compliments that bordered on overfamiliar. I stayed close, watching their interactions like a hawk. Unable to resist, I chimed in, "You two really enjoyed that dinner, didn't you?" My tone was sharp enough to cut through their pleasantries. Their smiles faltered for just a moment before one of them recovered and said, "Absolutely. But tonight is where the real decisions about your wife's future are made." That got my attention. "And what exactly does that mean?" I asked, not bothering to hide my skepticism. One of the men smiled in a way that didn't sit right with me. "She'll explain everything. It all depends on the role she's chosen. This is a unique process, as you'll see. Why not just have a formal interview like a normal company?" I pressed. He shrugged casually. "Formal interviews attract the wrong kind of people, those who flaunt their resumes instead of showing who they really are. This way, everyone's more relaxed. It's a better gauge of compatibility." Before I could argue further, my wife's friend stepped in. "This is just how it works," she said firmly. "Trust me, everything's fine." I wasn't convinced, but I reluctantly stepped back. Moments later, my wife was called away for a private discussion. When I tried to follow, her friend blocked me. "Stay here. It's part of the process," she said, her tone leaving no room for debate. Frustration simmered as I stood there, unable to do anything. From where I was, I could only hear muffled voices, nothing clear enough to understand. When my wife finally reappeared, her face was glowing with excitement. "You won't believe it," she said, practically bouncing with joy. "I'm going to be a senior client relations manager." The two men followed behind her, congratulating her and mentioning some kind of special assignment. She'd be starting soon. Naturally, I wanted answers. "What kind of assignment?" I asked. She gave me a playful smile. "I'll tell you all about it when we're home. For now, let's just enjoy the night." Against my better judgment, I let it go. We spent the rest of the evening mingling with the other guests, but something felt off. No one seemed to know much about the company or its operations. The entire event felt staged, like a performance. The drive home was quiet, though my wife's excitement was palpable. As we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me with a grin. "Big things are coming. You'll see." By the time we got inside, I'd reached my limit. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. That's it. No more secrets, I said, my voice firm. Tell me exactly what's going on. What's this assignment? What kind of senior manager role is this? And who the hell are these people? Why is everything so vague? She looked startled by my outburst but quickly composed herself. It's just how the company works, she said, motioning for me to sit down. They're very private, and they have their own way of doing things. It's not like a typical corporate setup. I crossed my arms, waiting for her to elaborate. They organize something. I'm not entirely sure what yet, she admitted. But they've made it clear I'll know everything once I start on Monday. You took a job without knowing exactly what you'll be doing? I asked, trying to keep my frustration in check. And you expect me to be okay with that? They've been upfront about their confidentiality policy, she said defensively. Besides, it's not like I had a ton of options after losing my last job. What about the pay? I asked, changing tactics. Is this at least worth all the mystery? Her face brightened. The pay's really good. We'll be able to cover Christmas and still have money left over. It's a big step up from my last job. That part gave me some relief, but not enough to erase my doubts. Fine, I said. But you're telling me everything as soon as you know. No more of this when the time is right nonsense. She nodded, though I could tell my tone had soured her mood. Of course, she said, trying to sound reassuring. So, what's with the early start tomorrow? I asked. You don't officially start until Monday. I have to meet someone from the company, she said with a shrug. They're going to show me around and go over some initial details. It's a bit of an orientation. Plus, the commute is longer than I'm used to. All right, I said, leaning back in my chair. But I'm telling you now, I don't like all this secrecy. If something seems off, I'm pulling you out. Understood? She gave a faint smile. Understood. But everything's going to be fine. That night, she fell asleep quickly, but I lay awake, my mind racing. The secrecy, the strange process, the cryptic assignment. It all felt too convoluted to be harmless. Still, there was nothing I could do. For now, I'd have to wait. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed. That wasn't unusual, but the note she left on the nightstand felt rushed. Breakfast is on the stove. Something about it didn't sit right. I ate the breakfast she'd left, but the uneasy feeling lingered. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I checked the closet. What I found made my stomach churn. Her clothes were in disarray, like someone had hurriedly gone through them. More alarming was what was missing. A dress I always thought of as too intimate for casual outings, and a set of lace lingerie I'd never seen her wear outside the house. I grabbed my phone and called her immediately. She answered, but the background noise was loud. Voices, laughter, and music. What's going on? And what are you wearing? I asked, my voice tight. I can't talk right now, she said, sounding annoyed. There's a serious problem I'm dealing with. I'll explain everything when I get home. Before I could respond, she hung up. I spent the rest of the day pacing, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. By the time she walked through the door that evening, I was ready for answers. You won't believe the day I've had, she said, dropping her bag. I didn't give her a chance to continue. Take off your coat, I said bluntly. She frowned. What? Why? Just do it, I insisted. Reluctantly, she removed her coat. When I didn't see the lingerie or the dress, I frowned. But my suspicions didn't go away. I crossed my arms, my frustration simmering. Where are they? The dress and the lace lingerie. Did you wear them to work? Her expression shifted from confused to irritated. Are you serious right now? They're in the laundry, she snapped. I tried them on but decided they needed washing. She let out a huff and added, You've been so paranoid lately. Honestly, it's exhausting. Her words stung, but I couldn't deny she had a point. Ever since this mysterious job situation had started, I'd been on edge. I took a breath and forced myself to dial it back. Fine, I said, but at least tell me what happened today. She nodded and sank onto the couch. They've asked me to organize a major event. It's top secret, but the big news is they're planning a surprise for me at the company's holiday party. That caught my attention. What kind of surprise? I asked, skeptical. I have no idea, she admitted with a shrug. But it's happening at my friend's house. We're both invited, so you'll see for yourself. Her excitement was palpable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. Still, I decided not to push her further that night. She seemed genuinely happy about the upcoming event, and I didn't want to ruin the mood. But as I lay in bed, my thoughts raced. What kind of surprise required so much secrecy? And why all the elaborate steps to keep me in the dark? I drifted off to sleep with more questions than answers. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let us know in the comments. The next evening, she came rushing through the door, her face flushed. We need to go now, she said hurriedly. Go where? I asked, caught off guard. I got held up at work, and we're already late, she explained, grabbing her coat. Still confused but unwilling to argue, I threw on my jacket and followed her out to the car. As I drove, she gave me directions to her friend's countryside house. Her urgency kept me from asking too many questions, though my mind raced with possibilities. When we arrived, the house was lit up like a fairground. Music spilled into the driveway, and as we stepped inside, a wave of confetti and balloons greeted us. The place buzzed with laughter, chatter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. This wasn't just a gathering, it was a full-blown party. As we moved through the crowd, I noticed how many people stopped to congratulate my wife. Some even raised their glasses in her honor. It seemed like everyone knew about her new job and was genuinely happy for her. Despite my reservations, I couldn't help but feel a small flicker of pride seeing her in the spotlight. Then, one of the men from the restaurant, the one who'd been part of her initial interview, climbed onto a table, holding a champagne glass high. All right, everyone, he called out, his voice cutting through the chatter. Now that we've had our fun, it's time for the main event, the swinger party. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him, but the room erupted in cheers, and to my disbelief, people began undressing. Chaos broke loose. Without hesitation, I grabbed my wife's hand and pulled her toward the door. What are you doing? She protested, trying to pull away. We don't have to join in. Her words only made me more determined to leave. By the time we reached the car, her phone was already buzzing with calls and texts. Where are you? What happened? Are you coming back? She answered one of the calls, calmly explaining that I wasn't feeling well and we'd had to leave. Though her tone was composed, I could see the frustration in her eyes. When we got home, I didn't waste any time. What the hell was that? I demanded, my voice rising. Do you seriously think it's okay to be part of something like that? She sighed, visibly irritated. We didn't have to participate, she said. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I don't care what the conditions were, I shot back. You're not going back there. She crossed her arms, her expression defiant. Fine, she said curtly, but I'm not quitting. I have a job to do, and I'm not leaving after just 1 week. The next few days passed relatively calmly, but the tension lingered. One evening, I decided to press her for more answers. So, what's going on with that assignment of yours? I asked as she worked on her laptop. She paused and looked at me. I'm still working on it, she said. It's a big project, and there's a lot to figure out. I'll tell you everything once it's finalized. Her answer did little to ease my concerns. You've been acting strange lately, I said, leaning against the counter. And after what happened at that party, I'm finding it hard to trust this whole setup. She sighed, clearly frustrated. Look, she said, that party was a one-off. There are idiots everywhere, but it doesn't mean the entire job is like that. Can we please stop bringing it up? I didn't press further, but her words didn't reassure me. Over the next week, her schedule became more demanding. She started coming home later and later, always claiming she was swamped with work. We're working on some incredible ideas, she said one night, a glimmer of excitement in her eyes. The team is really coming together, and I'm confident this is going to be a success. But her late nights didn't sit well with me. I couldn't ignore how tired she looked every time she walked through the door. When I brought it up, she brushed me off. This is the kind of opportunity that could make or break my career, she said. I have to give it my all. Despite her enthusiasm, my unease grew. Her explanations were always vague, and the secrecy surrounding her assignment only fueled my doubts. Still, I kept my concerns to myself, not wanting to spark another argument. Then, one evening, she came home looking more energized than she had in days. "Tomorrow's the big day," she announced, her smile wide. "Everything we've been working on leads up to this. It's going to be huge." Her excitement was contagious, even if I didn't fully understand what she was talking about. "So, what exactly is happening tomorrow?" I asked, hoping for clarity. "You'll have to wait and see," she replied, still smiling. "But trust me, it's going to be worth it. This could even lead to a big raise for me. Just wait until tomorrow." Her optimism didn't rub off on me. As she headed to bed, I stayed up, replaying her words in my head. Whatever was coming, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The next step was identifying the people at the top. It wasn't easy, but persistence paid off. My lawyer and I uncovered the names of the key players, her bosses, event organizers, and other facilitators who had kept the operation running. Armed with this information, we filed a lawsuit against the company, accusing them of running an illicit operation under the guise of a legitimate business. The evidence we had was damning, and it didn't take long for the authorities to step in. As the case gained traction, the company's glossy facade crumbled. Former employees began coming forward, sharing their experiences and corroborating our findings. In court, the ruling was swift. The so-called business was shut down, and its leaders faced hefty fines, with several of them charged with criminal offenses. It was a small victory, but it felt like a significant step toward justice. With the company out of the picture, I turned my attention back to her. Divorce was inevitable, and I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. The court battle was tense, but the evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor. The video, the texts, and even her own admission of enjoying her lifestyle painted a damning picture. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor, granting me the divorce and ensuring she had no claim to anything I'd worked for. But the story didn't end there. One morning, my phone rang, and I recognized her number. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but decided to answer. "You're the worst person I've ever met," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Do you know how many people you've put out of work because of your vendetta?" I stayed calm. "That's exactly what I wanted," I replied coolly. "Maybe now they'll find jobs that don't involve destroying lives." Her anger flared. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll make sure your life is a living hell." True to her word, she launched a campaign of lies and sabotage. She told mutual acquaintances that I was abusive, emailed false complaints to my boss, and even posted defamatory comments about me online. Each attack required a response. I documented everything, every message, every rumor, every attempt to tarnish my reputation. My attorney and I filed cease and desist letters, and when she crossed the line, we didn't hesitate to take her back to court. Every time, the evidence spoke for itself. The court cleared my name and exposed her for the vindictive liar she was. In the end, the truth prevailed. The court issued a restraining order, barring her from contacting me or interfering in my life. Her relentless attempts to ruin me only solidified my resolve. She had tried to break me, but all she did was prove that I was better off without her. With the legal battles behind me, I decided it was time to take control of the narrative. For too long, I had been reacting to her lies, defending myself against her manipulations. Now, it was time to go on the offensive. Among the evidence I had gathered was the damning video of her betrayal. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I knew it had to be done. I shared the video with a select group of people, those who needed to see the truth. This wasn't about revenge for its own sake. It was about ensuring that everyone understood the kind of person she had become. For too long, her facade of innocence and victimhood had shielded her from accountability. The reactions were swift and devastating for her. Friends who had stood by her cut ties immediately. Family members who had defended her were left speechless. Word spread quickly, and the video became a whispered scandal within her social circles. Invitations to events dried up, and even her professional connections began distancing themselves. The consequences of her actions were finally catching up to her. She tried to spin the situation, of course, claiming that I was out to ruin her life. But the evidence was irrefutable, and her credibility was in tatters. Unable to handle the mounting judgment and isolation, she made the decision to leave the city. She packed her belongings and moved far away, hoping to start over in a place where no one knew her. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was struggling to rebuild her life, but by then, I had stopped paying attention. Her problems were no longer mine to bear. As for me, the house we had shared was a constant reminder of the chaos she had brought into my life. Selling it was the only logical step. The process was cathartic, a way to shed the last remnants of a toxic chapter. With the money from the sale, I moved to a new neighborhood, far from the shadows of my past. It was a fresh start, both physically and emotionally. In my new home, I found peace for the first time in years. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was comforting. I focused on rebuilding my life, reconnecting with old friends, pursuing hobbies I'd neglected, and rediscovering the person I had been before she came into my life. People often ask why I went to such lengths, why I fought so hard, and why I shared the video. My answer is simple. Sometimes the truth needs to come to light, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Her actions had consequences, and it was time for her to face them. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because it was the only way to truly move on. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about closure. Looking back now, I'm at peace with my choices. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine again. The scars she left behind have become reminders of my resilience. I've learned to value honesty, loyalty, and, most importantly, myself. And that, I think, is the clearest answer to the question everyone seems to ask. Why did I fight so hard? Because I deserved better. And now, I have it. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let us know in the comments.